edition of RPM, Religion, Politics, and Either Money or Music. So let's get your motor running. Here we are. It's good to be here on a new show that we're going to do. Going to be on the radio, kind of a podcast first. We call it RPM, which stands for not revolutions per minute, which is what a normal thought pattern is about something like that. But we're going to be calling it Religion, Politics, and Either Money or Music. We think there's enough M to go around, so probably both. This is going to be about things that people maybe aren't supposed to talk about at the kitchen table, or not supposed to talk about. It's considered impolite if you talk about religion or politics or money, and in some cases even music. But what we want to do is talk about those things and generate a discussion where people that listen or watch this go home and say, hey, you know what he said about this? Maybe it's okay to talk about that, you know? And I think part of the big division that we have in our country right now, it has a lot to do with the fact that people don't talk about things. They don't listen to what other people say that might be considerably a different point of view. They just want to regurgitate their own point of view and don't understand the other one because it's seen as an absolute. It's an all or nothing thing. There's no room for compromise because these are things that we don't compromise about because we're Americans, damn it. That make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Okay. Well, our first guest today is going to be the ATG. Can you tell me what ATG is?
Well, it's just my initials, but I'm not going to say any more than that.
Okay. Well, we won't make it about the initials. We'll make it about you and your thoughts because that's what we're really looking for. We're talking about politics, but we're talking about a part of politics that maybe gets overlooked a little. I'm not sure. But today, people say things like, well, I have the right to free speech. I have a right to my opinion. Everybody has a right to their opinion. But don't you also have a responsibility to do some research? Maybe that's a different R that we could use. To do some research. You have a responsibility to think about what you say before you say it. It's not just about opinions. If there are facts out there, especially if your opinions are based on other opinions and there's no fact base in the entire episode. So, but you consider yourself to be an educated voter in contrast to some people in your generation. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, that's an accurate statement.
So with all the social media that's out there today, all the different sources of potential information, where do you go to get what you would consider facts? Something that you can go into a ballot booth and say, you know what, I've done my research on this, I know about this, therefore I know who to vote for. How do you go out and get responsible, real information?
So what I do is I don't depend on one source of information. I try to read multiple articles about the same story or person. And then I draw upon my knowledge of, American history, world history, and also my knowledge of government to come up with a final choice. That's how I like to operate.
And you operate from a position of I have some core values. These are the things that are important to me. And earlier when we were talking, you said one thing that is important to you and you think distinguishes the Democrats from the Republicans is that Republicans like smaller government, less intrusive government, and Democrats like bigger government, more in control. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, I think that's kind of like the fundamental difference, but of course there's a lot of politics that make everything muddy, but I think if you boil it all down, that's really it.
So for you, that's the important distinction between voting Republican or Democrat?
No, not exactly. So what I meant by that statement is that's the true difference, but now they're more like, there's a lot of, one topic voters, like, am I pro-choice? Am I pro-life? Mm-hmm. And that's it. They don't think about anything else.
Yeah, okay. I think sometimes those are called single-issue voters.
Yes. Yeah,
and the NRA, whether you believe in the rights of gun owners or whether you and the Second Amendment or whether you believe more that guns should be restricted and be more like some of our European friends or Canada where they're few and far between. Those are single issue voters. Do you have either of those issues important issues for you? Are they at the top of the priority list?
They're not at the top of the priority list, but obviously I do lean a certain way.
Okay. Well, you lean toward a conservative way, so you probably closer to Second Amendment than you are to gun restriction?
No, I'm
Not necessarily?
not necessarily. I
Okay.
believe in the good of the. I think what's important is with overall safety of the nation, and if gun restrictions are necessary, then so be it.
Okay, so you don't buy into what the NRA says that we need to. That's a fundamental right for us to have weapons and be able to defend ourselves.
Yeah, I know it's in the Constitution, but I've heard many different interpretations of what it really means.
Okay, but that's not going to be a decision maker for you because you're not a single issue voter. That'll
Yes.
be in there, but it's not the main
Yeah,
thing.
it's
right?
definitely not at the top of my mind. Like I understand why people feel the need to own firearms. I mean, I've even thought about buying one myself. But at the same time, if we all don't have guns, like I'm okay with that too.
Okay, all right. Well, and we could bring somebody on that would bring a different opinion, but that's not what we're doing today. We're just trying to find out from where you're coming when you go into the ballot box. You brought up pro-life versus pro-choice. Is that an important issue for you?
It's important, but I would not put it top of my priority list because also, I am a man. It's not really something that's incredibly relevant to me at this time, but it's important. Don't get me wrong.
Okay, you consider it important, but because you're not the one carrying the baby, it's not a prime issue for you.
Yeah.
You think that there are other factors that would probably be higher on your list of who or what you voted for.
Yeah. Yeah.
When we talked about big government versus small government, that was kind of interesting because what goes along with that usually is big taxes versus smaller taxes.
Exactly. Yeah.
That would be and so if you say you don't like big government, you probably don't like as many programs that are funded by tax dollars as you do the other way around.
Yes, that I would say that's true.
So
Yeah.
the smaller taxes, you believe that you'd be able to spend your money better than the government.
See, that's debatable. I don't actually know. What I believe is science. I believe what does the data say. I think that we shouldn't just always stick to low taxes or high taxes all the time. We should actually be switching between whichever method works the best for the given time. That's my belief.
Okay, well, and you're a businessman too.
Yeah.
So correct me if I'm wrong. Businessmen like profits, but they also like what gives them the best return. So if you're a taxpayer, you like a government that gives you the best return on that tax dollar. If you see what they're doing, you say, I think that's pretty good stuff. I like what they're doing. I don't mind paying those taxes, but I really don't like paying these taxes. Do you have anything that you see the income and the outgo helping to define how you vote?
I mean, what you said was was really perfect. That's exactly how I like to look at things. Am I getting a return on investment? But that's really all I have to say on that.
Okay.
It's perfectly worded.
What do you think from national, state to local? Which of those governments do you think is most important to the individual person?
I mean, of course, local is important, but I still think national is the most important.
Okay.
It really decides the fate of the nation itself, and guess what? That's the biggest thing that government does.
Yeah, we're something like 4 to 5% of the world's population.
Yeah.
So how we are viewed and how we interact with the rest of the world is more important to you than maybe some of the things that a local government would be involved in, the local roads or the local parks or the law enforcement locally. Those kinds of things, you think, they're probably going to take care of themselves more so than the way we're presented to the rest of the world?
I think so. I think with local politics, there's definitely less pressure to really fit a certain belief. By very virtue, they have to kind of function the same, regardless of what party they're a part of. I mean, of course, there's differences, but they have to take care of their constituents.
Yeah.
And at the national level, it's not, obviously, the local guy, he can be lost track of, but they're really making choices like, are we going to go to war with this nation? We're going to drop a bomb on them? Are we going to launch missiles across the ocean, like, are we going to enter a trade war? Like, what is our environmental policy? Are we going to allow these chemicals to be pumped into the air? I mean, these are all policies that I think have a bigger impact on people than they actually realize.
That's a great answer, and it also makes me wonder a little bit about if that's such an important part of what we do in this country, then how do you think it's working for us in Washington right now?
Oh, it's a mess, like usual. It's a mess.
Well, when you say like usual, has it been a mess, you think, from the beginning?
Oh, yeah.
And we just don't our mess is different than somebody else's mess and different than somebody else's mess, but it's always been a mess, so we should just kind of understand that it's going to be a mess.
Yeah, we definitely had to understand that it's a mess, but there's a few reasons why. One reason is it was built to be a mess by very design. Like, the founding fathers, they didn't want government to be too efficient, because that means if one party gets in control, then the country will undergo radical change. So they built in a lot of mechanisms to protect the country from changing too fast.
And back then, they didn't have the party system that we do today. There have been evolving parties, changing parties, new parties. The Democrats and Republicans have been around for, I think, over 100 years now. I'm not sure exactly how long, but 1860, I think President Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln, was the first presidential candidate that was a Republican. So you're going back 160 years, something in that neighborhood. So are you one of those that believes that, hey, I lean toward voting Republican, but I wouldn't want the Republicans to have too much power because they'd probably go too far with it. I'd rather have it be a bit messy and have Democrats and Republicans and maybe split up the power a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's better to share the power.
We're going to find that out because we just elected a Democrat president, a Democrat vice president for obvious reasons. I said that, I specifically mentioned the vice president, though, because the Senate is split 50-50,
Exactly.
which doesn't happen a lot, but that gives the vice president the tiebreaker.
Yeah.
So in essence, the Democrats control the presidency. They control, by a very slim margin, the United States Senate, and they've got something like an eight-person majority in the United States House of Representatives. So now we've got all three leaning to the left. Now, last time that happened, I think it was Barack Obama, Harry Reid, and Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi is the only constant there, but she's been around for a while. And that pendulum seemed to swing pretty far to the left when they were all in control. Obamacare came out, and I think the group that stays in the middle got a little nervous about them going too far to the left, and that's why a lot of people that think like you, maybe we should go back to the right a little bit.
So I need to clarify.
Okay.
I lean towards the left, not the right.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, that's because I guess I had it backwards, but it's not. But you look both sides. I mean, you're not a guy that says I'm going to go in and pull D all the way down. You're a guy that comes in and says I can go back and forth based on what I think is the best person, but I'm more of an independent that leans to the left.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we've got a government that leans to the left. Do you feel that that's a good thing, or is it a wait and see over the next 2 years and see what they do with the amount of power that they have?
I generally think it's a good thing, but they have, of course, look, I do have to say something. All politicians are politicians, so so they do funny business, and I don't consider that a part of the ideology itself. But so I kind of had to make that distinction. But I like more left-leaning policies. I just that's my personal belief.
Okay. That's fair.
Yeah.
And it's good to know. That's what we're here for, is to try and find those kinds of things out. Do you believe that? I mean, you made the comment that politicians are politicians. Well, they weren't always, right? So when do you think that happens? When do you think it happens that you can't trust them, or that they say things that are a little different? You got to keep your eye on them. Is that the kind of people that these jobs attract, or does it happen somewhere as you rise through power? What do you think causes that?
I think it's by very virtue of the job. You have to be a certain way. I mean, a lot of voters, they're not well informed, and your whole livelihood depends on, can I get these people to vote for me? So a lot of times just going up on stage and having a formal debate with someone is not going to convince the average voter. So you unfortunately will have to do some underhanded tactics.
Okay, so the virtue of the job doesn't necessarily exist because the job forces you to not be totally honest with the people that are out there.
Yeah.
Do you think somebody that was totally honest? I think they made a couple movies out of it. I can't remember. I think they were funny movies too, where somebody was totally somebody that's honesty is a policy of theirs that they could move up to the top of the chain in Washington.
I highly doubt they would.
Really?
Yeah, that's impossible.
So the whole system's going to have problems then if we can't trust the people to begin with, right? Because the system, you're saying, causes them to have these mistrusts.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. All right. And I think we got a lot of really good information, some ideas about younger voters and what you look at and which way you tend to lean after doing a considerable amount of research. And you believe that national is more important than local in the scope of things because it has such a big impact on us versus or inclusive with the rest of the world.
Yeah, but also whatever consequences happen abroad, they affect us on the micro level too, more than having a road fixed.
Great. And even despite some of the potholes that we have in Michigan, our guest today was ATG, and we really appreciate you being here today.
Oh, yeah, it was my pleasure.
All right, great. RPM, get your motor running.